In the 11th century, nomadic Turkic tribes migrated into modern-day Turkey. They operated with a speed that settled agrarian societies struggled to counter. The early Ottoman rulers governed directly from the saddle. They led military campaigns in person, constantly moved across their territory to inspect the lands, and allowed everyday people to approach them directly to solve local disputes. As they expanded, they absorbed the administrative systems of the Iranian, Islamic, and Greek cultures they encountered. They synthesized these structures into a highly centralized government that could efficiently impose laws across massive distances. To enforce this central authority, they created the Janissaries. The empire took young Christian boys from their homes, castrated them, converted them to Islam, and trained them as professional soldiers. The state provided their weapons and income, ensuring their absolute loyalty belonged entirely to the Sultan. When the Ottomans marched on Europe, this state-funded, professional war machine faced off against feudal levies, disorganized groups of peasant farmers armed with whatever they could scavenge. The Janissaries easily annihilated them. The empire's early expansion was the result of a hands-on leadership style paired with a perfectly loyal military machine. By 1566, the borders stabilized and the conquests gradually ground to a halt. For the Ottoman elites, conquering new land had been the primary way to move up the social hierarchy and gain wealth. Without new territory, they had to look for influence elsewhere. With a permanent capital established in Istanbul, the sultans stepped off the battlefield. They retreated deep into the imperial harem, a secluded political organization inside the palace, consisting of the sultan's wives, mothers, eunuchs, and slaves. Future sultans were no longer sent out to serve as regional governors or military commanders. Most inherited the throne with zero practical experience, leaving them dependent on family members and palace elites who controlled the flow of information. By locking themselves inside the palace, the sultans transformed their centralized power into a vulnerability. The empire's direction was now dictated by whoever managed to whisper in the sultan's ear. The Ottomans held a monopoly on overland spice routes, charging high taxes. To bypass fees, European explorers sailed completely around Africa. This starved the Ottomans of trade income, while new maritime routes flooded European and Iranian powers with wealth to fund their own professional armies. Whenever a competent Ottoman reformer tried to stabilize the state by reducing corruption, they threatened the income of the wealthy elites. These elites consistently prioritized their own fortunes over the state's survival, choosing to stage coups and remove anyone who attempted to end the graft. In the 1640s, the administration of Sultan Ibrahim attempted to curb corruption and improve taxation. The elites rallied around Ibrahim's own wife to have the Grand Vizier fired. Eventually, the elites and the Janissaries executed the Sultan himself, replacing him with his 6-year-old son. The empire's internal politics became a system of sabotage, where the elite class actively destroyed any person or policy that threatened their personal wealth. Seeing that the Ottoman military was no longer unstoppable, European nations adopted a new strategy. They formed repetitive military coalitions, continuously ganging up on the Ottomans to carve away pieces of their territory. A devastating military loss to Russia in 1774 forced the Ottomans to pay massive sums and hand over territory. To prevent mass rebellion across the bleeding empire, the central government had to grant sweeping autonomy to outer provinces, losing direct taxation control. While the borders collapsed, an ideological threat emerged from the French Revolution: the concept of nationalism, a shared identity based on common heritage. The Ottoman system categorized its subjects strictly by religion: Muslim, Christian, Jewish. Because they only tracked religious affiliation, the government was blind to the fact that groups like the Greeks and Serbs were forging powerful new national identities, united by their shared hatred of Ottoman rule. By sticking to a religious census, while their subjects were fueled by ethnic nationalism, the central government lost control over the very populations they claimed to rule. By 1826, the Sultan faced a grim reality. The Janissaries, who continually mutinied to block the adoption of modern military tactics, had to be completely eradicated for the empire to survive. In the middle of the night, the Sultan mobilized his newly formed, European-trained artillery units, silently positioning them around the sleeping Janissary barracks. On June 15th, they rained cannon fire down on the compound. The soldiers loyal to the Sultan moved in to kill any survivors. wiping out the once unstoppable army in a single day. To simply begin modernizing, the empire had to violently execute the very institution that had originally built its greatness. With the Janissaries gone, the empire instituted massive 19th century reforms. They eradicated local fiefdoms, clamped down on corruption, built centralized railroads, and established fast telegraph networks to rapidly deploy troops against rebellions. This chart shows the Ottoman government's total income and the massive percentage of it consumed strictly by debt repayment. Lacking their own domestic manufacturing industry, the Ottomans had to borrow astronomical sums from European banks to fund these modern infrastructure projects. This heavy financial leverage allowed European powers to effortlessly annex Ottoman territories. High debt allowed the French to take Tunisia and the British to take Egypt, simply by calling in the loans. The Ottomans updated their infrastructure, but it cost them their sovereignty. They had replaced the threat of internal military mutiny with the threat of foreign bankruptcy. In 1908, a coalition of dissidents known as the Young Turks seized control of the government. In opposition to Western imperialism, they made a desperate attempt to forge a unified, shared Islamic national identity to keep the remaining country together. The geopolitical reality by 1914 was bleak. Foreign companies owned the empire's vital industries, and European powers were holding meetings to openly plot exactly how they would carve up the remaining Ottoman territory. Faced with guaranteed colonial subjugation, the Ottomans joined World War I alongside Germany. It was an apocalyptic gamble, their final chance to violently expel all foreign influence while their enemies were distracted. Despite successfully defending Istanbul from the naval landings at Gallipoli, the broader war effort was a catastrophic failure. An estimated 800,000 Ottoman soldiers died. The 700-year-old empire threw the last remnants of its strength into a world-ending war, betting its entire existence on a single roll of the dice. And they lost. The victorious European powers completely dismembered the empire. The Ottomans were reduced to a heavily restricted puppet state, isolated in Istanbul and operating under international supervision, while their outer territories were handed to Britain, France, Greece, and Italy. This triggered an immediate, fierce backlash from the Anatolian heartland. Rogue militias and former Ottoman soldiers refused to lay down their weapons, forming a unified resistance to fight the European occupiers. These fighters explicitly renounced any claim to the dead Ottoman state. They successfully repelled the invaders and officially birthed the Republic of Turkey in 1923. The final dismantling of the 700-year-old monarchy ended the cycle of internal sabotage, allowing the new republic to build a state focused on its own national borders, rather than a failing imperial legacy.